Welcome to Thinking Out Loud. I'm Joel.
I am Brad. Hello from Detroit. I do this every time.
Brad today? Okay, here's what we have for you today. On February 16th, Rob Gregory, who's the president of sales for Husay. I don't know Rob. I'm sure you're a great guy, Rob. But he wrote an article in Adweek about how PewDiePie signifies the end of the Wild West and the start of the golden age of influencers. I want to dive into this a little bit today because it's a fascinating article. And if I could just read very, very quickly one key paragraph. He talks about PewDiePie's supposed implosion and based on his horrible anti-Semitic comments. And he says, Rob says this: with this, we welcome the conclusion of the Wild West chapter of the fast-paced industry of influencer marketing. It's a chapter filled with many fly-by-night companies who match your brand with storytellers, quote unquote, self-serve platforms filled with unrecognizable influencers, unprofessional talent, and in the end, disappointed and confused brands. And
so in English, he's saying there's a lot of sketchy things happening trying to allow influencers to tell the story for brands.
Right, and with PewDiePie's implosion, now we're going to get to the grown-up stage
right.
of YouTube influencers, and then he gives several very, very appropriate recommendations for how you go about doing influencer marketing
sure.
and all that. But I want to focus on his central thesis that the title is, does PewDiePie signify the end of the Wild West? And are we now in some golden age of influencer marketing?
So those are great terms. It's funny, well in advance of this article, I've used the term Wild Wild West to describe influencer marketing for a very long time. And here's what we do know about the industry, is that it's continuing to mature. We know that it's currently fairly opaque. It's starting to become more and more transparent. It's still really, really hard to get the right influencers connected to a brand. We know that brands and agencies now recognize the importance of influencer marketing, and it's becoming very, very normal for these organizations to have a budget for influencer marketing. In fact, there's more dollars going to influencer marketing now than there ever has before. And now there's still the macro trend of people moving away from TV, cutting the cord, and people still see influencer marketing and YouTube as this interesting hybrid of digital marketing where you can still click in links in the show description and track everything, and traditional TV where you have tons and tons of views. So it's a really fascinating industry where there's a lot of things coming together. So we all know that. I think we would agree on these parts too.
Yeah, and that's all well and good. I want to take a couple issues with this article.
Yep.
Though, because I think he starts off by a wrong analysis. I think he asks the wrong questions, and I think he gives the wrong answers, all the way across the board.
Questions, analysis, answers, wrong.
They're all wrong. So it's PewDiePie's implosion doesn't signify anything. Like, it signifies absolutely nothing.
Really poor decision making, maybe.
Okay, yeah, obviously, but look, if you've watched five of his videos,
right.
You know that this guy, he is the YouTube version of a Howard Stern or Rush Limbaugh. He traffics in controversy. That's his shtick. That's what he does. Yes, he's a gamer. He doesn't give a rip about anything. He lives by his own rules. He lives by his own standards.
Shock job.
He's the YouTube shock job. So any advertiser, his MCN maker, owned by Disney, the fact that they're now coming out like, oh, what is this? We had no idea. It's like, what did you expect to happen? This was inevitable. YouTube changed its algorithm. It really damaged his views. Gee, what are the chances that he's gonna do something controversial, shocking, in order to boost his numbers? What are the chances of that?
Let me tell you.
Like, how naive are you? Like, what did you think was going to happen by associating with somebody like PewDiePie?
Since August, he's made 9 anti-Semitic remarks on his YouTube channel. So this was not something that came out of nowhere, right? Obviously, this is what he does. It's not okay. It's terrible. It's the bottom of the intelligence for humor. But
it's a gaming channel.
They knew what they were getting, you know?
Yeah.
It's not a surprise.
So to make any conclusions at all based on this, it's like, well, yeah, PewDiePie said something controversial. and water is wet. Like,
Right.
what is the big realization here?
I think the argument that he's trying to make, sorry to cut you off
go
here,
ahead.
is that people need to be selective in choosing who they have to represent their brand. But this is not an influencer marketing. This is not a new thing by in any way, shape, or form. And we could point to countless examples of that, right?
Yeah, Subway and Jared. Okay,
Yeah,
obviously,
Tiger Woods and Accenture and like 20 other brands.
and Nike and like like it's like this is hey, anytime you're gonna have somebody speak for your brand, then yes, there's obvious associated risk.
Right.
Point is, there's no significant change here. This doesn't
not.
change anything. You're still gonna have, and then sorry, before we go back to that. You know, he's talking about like, you know, oh, many fly-by-night companies are now like, what are you talking about? Like, this isn't like they're not going to be influenced because or affected by the fact that PewDiePie blew up. Maker might be, but Maker is owned by Disney, and they're one of the oldest MCNs in Hollywood. They're not a fly-by-night company.
Who's shrinking the number of influencers they're working with and laying off people as well, for the record.
Which, and all that means is they're going to get picked up by Fullscreen or Studio 71 or Omnia. It's like that is not this is no tipping point in any way, shape, or form. It just isn't. I'm sorry, the guy, he's just wrong. Like, and his criticism, and his suggested this is going to have any effect on self-serve platforms. We've done a whole bit about platforms.
Yep.
Platforms are on the rise because they fulfill something really, really valuable, which is show discovery.
Right.
Now, if a brand comes into it expecting it to be effortless and easy and smooth,
Got another thing coming.
Yeah, they got another thing coming. But for show discovery, the platforms are great, and they're not going to change. And in fact, a lot of the platforms make it really, really easy to find data that you actually, in other contexts, you would have to either have a subscription to some kind of data service, or you'd have to ask the YouTuber themselves for. So platforms aren't going anywhere.
Right.
They're really useful. You know, these platforms filled with unrecognizable influencers. There is no such thing as like that's what an oxymoronic statement, an unrecognizable influencer. Well, look, if they're an influencer, then they're recognizable by somebody, and
By
they've got a
definition.
relationship with an audience, and
Right.
that relationship is valuable to somebody.
Yeah, and it might be small, it might be micro influencers, which we've talked about before, but it doesn't change the fact that they're influencers to a market which is relevant.
Right. Unprofessional talent. Yeah. No joke. Of course they're unprofessional.
corporate.
They're not corporate. And unprofessional talent, this is exactly the reason that you want to use them, is because they're unprofessional
Right.
talent. Like, I'm wondering, like, does this guy get it at
Yeah,
all?
you need creatives on your team. Creatives are not going to wear a suit. They're not going to walk the line. They're not going to fit in a cozy box. There's no insight there.
Right.
Like,
The entire point of using influencers is that authentic voice advocating for your brand in a
Right.
deeply personal way. It's because they're unprofessional talent that they have credibility. The reason that you need unprofessional talent is because the professional talent doesn't have credibility. It doesn't do anything.
that's true. It's true.
So anyway, this is my rant about, like, no, we're not. There are always going to be elements to which this is the Wild West,
Right.
right? Because he makes the point, he's like, oh, you know, brands really need to work with the top 5, 10% who are really professional or brand safe and all that. Okay, well, gee, what's going to happen? Everybody who wants to do influencer marketing is going to try and work with that same 5, 10%.
Right.
And then you're going to be restricted to your big companies with your big dollars who can afford that kind of talent. And you've got all your other companies that can't afford that. Like, none of this here, what PewDiePie does isn't going to change a food company from wanting to work with a cook that's throwing up interesting YouTube videos. Like, no, it's not
not
going
gonna
to.
happen.
It's not like.
Here's what I do think is a point, which isn't hit on in this article, but look, it's influencer marketing. Things are changing a lot. So I mentioned earlier the layoffs at Maker and the fact that they're going to try to concentrate on 1,000 of their top influencers. That's a big change. Awesomeness TV, they had a deal with Verizon to have mobile streaming. That fell through, and now their CEO is resigning. So you're certainly seeing big players in the industry have fundamental changes, but it's no tipping point to the industry. The industry is continuing to evolve. Yes, there's new platforms that are coming on board. There are people, we see it all the time. Someone will like pick up the phone and now claim they represent certain people when they don't. And there are some of those fly-by-night individuals, but every industry will have certain oddities.
Like as if there aren't
PewDiePie-
any like shady TV sales people. I mean,
course,
like
yeah.
it's yeah. I mean, this is just it's a naive approach to it, and like it's unfortunate that somebody who's trying to familiarize themselves with influencer marketing is going to read this, and they're going to assume that this guy really knows the industry, knows what he's talking about, and he doesn't. It's just it isn't there. PewDiePie's implosion signifies absolutely nothing.
Yep.
Look, the one thing that he says is maybe coming into the golden age. Yeah, we're coming into the golden age because it's necessary and it works.
Right.
We're not coming into the golden age because it's no longer the Wild West. Insofar as you as a brand want somebody who isn't professional, who's not hired talent, who isn't a mouthpiece, to want them to speak credibly about your product and authentically, because that works, insofar as that dynamic's there, yeah, it's always going to be messy. The most authentic and worthwhile things in advertising are authentic and messy. And I mean, the one thing that I wish he would have said is like, you know, and I'm tooting our own horn here unapologetically, but like work with a group, an agency, whatever, that has a lot of experience in this and who knows who's reliable, who knows has a good track record, who knows they're going to be brand safe, even the smaller shows, but also be prepared to approach this completely differently.
Yep.
And it is. We were discussing this beforehand, and Chris, our camera guy, made the really good point. It's like, no, it's a totally different media, and it needs to be treated with it. And like this article is wanting to come again, which drives me nuts because we see this over and over and over again, coming in with the standards of television or radio or some kind of established media and slapping them on YouTube and expecting them to work, and then being shocked when they don't. No, can you learn that this is a different kind of media, and therefore requires a different set of tools to make it successful? Yes, it's messy. Yes, it's confusing, but there is a way to navigate through the maze of YouTube and all of the complications and make it work. There is a right way to do it. But I don't want people to be relaxed and be like, oh, now it's the golden age of YouTube and we're not going to have any more issues with PewDiePie. Sure you will. If this is the kind of show you're advertising
Shock Jock's been around for forever. As you continue to use Shock Jocks, you'll have problems. But look, lots of change that's happening in influencer marketing. There'll continue to be a lot of change as more people get into it, as more dollars flow. We want to continue to see change. The industry needs to evolve, but we are not at a tipping point because one Shock Jock decided to make some really, really inappropriate comments associated with his video, which aren't really all that different than the comments that he's been making for a very long time. So anyways, we appreciate you listening to us.
Do we have to go now? Is that? I want to keep going. This is fun.
You want to keep going?
I mean, do we? All right. No, we should. Do we have to go?
We're out of here. We're out of here. Executive decision. Thanks for listening. We'll talk more about this in the future.
Thanks for joining us. Comments down below. So long from Detroit.
We'll be right back.